Hello, this is a video about magic. This is a video about how each letter of the English language spells out a word / value. And each word spells out a sentence. And this is where and how one identity of volume is only increasing. As exceptions in exception nature and demonstration of the same thing. When we use logic that's self-valuing how we are not. That's self-valuing how admitting we are not. To discern in a positive value nature progression per its system, which is an identity of sophistication too, while as each semi-nature of itself, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. So magic, Mother's Alpha is God, inherent, conceives. C, the letter C, usually stands for consciousness. But with the word magic, for example, where it is positive magic, also positive onto itself, that identity of volume that all are, distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously how it is, distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously itself, making more and more of itself an invisible identity of forever nature, as a system that is distinct and non-distinctly Earth's value, distinctly from the rest of space nature, where it is concentrated, where more and more forever nature can be made that is positive or negative to its lasting memory, its perfect value progression. So where it is, in other words, we have self-value, how we are an identity of negative value nature progression. But the only reason why, the power / might behind that, is a breaching method. Thank God, upon hundreds of nations at once since semi-ancient times, knowing they would only be able to fathom through needs, means, and natures already having been self-valued, of positive and negative treatments, of identity treatments, as syntax nature, as opinion nature, conviction nature, and styles saying, oh, have someone else settle that, overtly criminally, or as roles with remotely used originally still since before our founding parents were born entrenched, was this method tied to everyone's fact-cheating nature, in layers sickly. So any kind of unity that would form would be discerned. Its leadership would be sought out and, worse than just heard. So our founding parents didn't have free speech. So they are pretending what is debatable is not, by quoting statutes and precedents, formal and informal. For example, formal meaning interbranch, intercampuses, private database relationships simultaneously, and overt criminal enterprises, and private ones juxtaposed with those natures of them originally still victim predator, where the identities of industries themselves can't defend themselves with logic without noting instabilities with market systems, hundreds of nations at once, specifically tied to, because if people can't afford it, not by accident. People were allotted roles with sciences tactically ulterior from this one that used this ground, all gather round, that is native pure, and causes evolution's fruits and gifts, means from nowhere, including especially regarding how we are fact-cheating nature as value. And this is about where and how we are value as nature / we are value as nature / nature as value. and it is where and how sequence nature as value that is positive unto itself. Only where and how it is. Its identity is also simultaneous nature. There is one identity of simultaneous nature that we could discern and take in relationship to our short words. Take in relationship to our sequence treatments, our positive and negative treatments. See, this is a method that we must face from semi-ancient times. Even if it is recorded clear as day. They didn't account for, when they counter bad things, they're blaming them on other things other than themselves wrongly. And, offensively too. Like, for example, cruel and unjust punishment is behind fake sides of fact treatments, like value treatments. We'll deal with this, but so with the magic part. See, no one's letting positive science be talked about because it uses where negative can only be positive. Like, for example, slavery. Positive, temporary positive, demonstrates that the only increasing identity of volume as itself, as that identity of scientific value, that is all identity of value progressions individually grouped and together, as revealed, as being revealed, as actually is. Mother's alpha consciousness. Mother's alpha's God's consciousness, inherent, conceives, magic. Mother's alpha's God's inherent conceives. There is the inherent, there is the active, and there is the progressive. The active is part inherent and is part progressive. And they are bound and only increasing simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. The cause of that effect and affect nature as value as nature / nature as value, is the value of one identity of value progressions, identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, as itself, as a value transfer system that became complete possession of the extent of the perfect worlds, positive, as all existence, as the identity of everything at once, before matter, and that realized how to increase its identity of possession over temporary space, over forever nature. The first volume. It is most practical to convict and or to counter or convict. So we're going to take positions, counterpositions, and moving counterpositions. For example, the first position is to say that algebra is not being taught correctly. When I'm not a doctor, algebra is not being taught correctly. When people teach about making positive out of negative, without teaching and having understood, without revealing too, allowing to be revealed too, how what is especially positive can and must also be made out of negatives. So those breaching method employed, tactics, methods, same way methods work with programming See, people say, well, I'm just a programmer. I'm just this. I'm just an English person. To speak about predicate act, for example. I could just speak about the predicate. And so we have teachers that speak about it wrong. Vaccine is strong. No, in other words, but sequence shifts are manifest. We're in a trap that keeps identities, like say, of police. This breaching method knew that the branches of government that are manifest as every country would be increasingly needed to be the way they are. But as exceptions. But I mean, in other words, only capable as that which would be only capable of being thought of or conceived of as unity, as realized seedings of and means to the cultivation of positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, no longer capable, increasingly, of speaking for that identity that the republic for which we stand was, when it was revealed in ancient times, before human relations became tactically, criminally foreign influenced, to exploit that without anyone individually grouped in together of the grounds, locations, areas, and states, or leaders understanding. This knew that they could trick, hurt, persuade, force, worse, make people have to react to the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Increasingly, more and more made no longer capable of it. There are proofs, and it is recorded, how many ways the ancients had more sophistication regarding the law, regarding English, regarding the other languages, regarding uses of all words, like God, which is an algebraic variable, most practical to be defined this way. It's all right if people have other takes on it, but it is also, that's not that true. It be also where people are just defending identity grounds, identities of difference in relationship to what is formally conceived as sciences. Note, simultaneously, increasingly self-valuing the criminal insidious natures and influences over the databases that were nobody's fault, but they were forced increasingly self-valued by people who have to do business, interact with value nature system anyway. One, again, that was as tactically ulterior from the one that causes evolution's fruits and gifts. Real science only feels like games all around, and it feels like that to individuals first, in sequence. Otherwise, it's negative value nature. See, but we can't compete to have everyone dealing with positive and negative through a child abuse method that our most sophisticated experts on the sciences, each of them individually grouped in together. See, these are a certain kind of victim that, and a certain kind of method that invests people, each age sickly distinctly. For example, to where and how also what is simultaneously was and is being and having been exploited, and where we are fact treatment nature, where the identity of the ground locations and names are brought and kept in our communications. So they're also looks just maybe like it. But there are people many ways. Syntax-oriented, fact-cheaping nature-oriented, and sequence shifts-oriented. Washington, D.C. and World Trade Center has rules with what is inter-campuses and intra-campuses connected, including private schools, homeschool, and public schools simultaneously, specifically effectively having maintained self-value by our nation here, hundreds of nations there, where they have legitimate victim-predator counters to try to, well, here and there at the same time as best they could, make what they call peace. Make what they call, jobs. What they call stability. That is still, at worst, the end of a whip. It is to what is simultaneous is not only value, is increasing value. So there are obligations to speak about what was signed, to have discerned what is simultaneous with American history, with other countries' histories. They have the opinion nature / conviction nature of all locations, areas, and states as natures of criminal insidiousness that was criminally legalized in collusion with this, not wanting to be, not realizing how that was all the physics, all the motivations, natures, needs, interests known, blamed on things with the books. They left / leave out increasingly value left out. All that is actually discernible. All that is actually being and having been said and communicated, while other was pretended simultaneously by the victim predators who speak about American history, every single person, because of this method. American history cannot be understood without understanding how the fact-cheaping nature of everyone, worse than just intercolonies, had in layers. They were victims of being incapable of not be, the laws. They would make it was like a nervous system. Like if someone would start trying to do things right, it would be sensed. The laws were that sick and they were sustained. Not one has trained. In summary, what we do real quick. Same way it'd be too expensive for all the locations that are needed for the space for the computers to think the way they are. So they have microchips. I'll put a link to microchips video. In other words, and they have now they start printing locations on carbon or whatever, where they can hold the temporary charge. So when the computer goes off, that stuff it can't remember anymore. It can't hold positive or negative. Identity of relationship to that location or not. It's an identity of value / value progression that everything is. So computers can't help but be this. And so we'll discern this. Or we'll learn this. But we have to have mandated law followed. So we have to understand that and how there are victim predators. Foreign and domestic in collusion. So we have to observe how this is recorded simultaneous and how it is maintained. And that goes to where and how this is on-off locations, on-off campuses of each age and nature. This goes to recorded how each age of the human fact-shaping nature is distinctly a victim. And legacy, I learned a lot from the care even though, of Barack Obama and of Donald Trump as people and as other leaders and as other, by understanding too simultaneously, especially differentially, the people too. It's easy to say the people are forsaken, and that's to blame. And where there are exceptions admitted, where there are appearance of needs to, and people. In other words, each location, area, and state, a method /S, the same way programs have to work with all locations. In the beginning and the end, the whole process. If they're following their own syntaxes, are following their, they're working with the binary. But binary, the only reason it's ones and twos is so they could is because they gave another identity to numbers. So if you press the key A on the keyboard, there's a binary representation of that. And that's because they could only have positive or not. Also on the other hardware side of it, not just the keyboard, and that's a data. So then there's a data stream. It's an identity of value / value progression, because it can't help but be. One identity of volume is coming to, from, as, with, and for itself. Increasingly positive way. Distinctly here to Earth. And the more and more we stay, one species tactically and as systems tactically ulterior from its own, the more and more our value as nature / nature as value is forced away from here. Lethal IDs. Force space nature transfer. And nature is identity. And identity is our semi-nature relationship to that identity which bound and increases the value of individual, grouped ages. This is invisible areas, states. This is invisible but still discernible. So with these fights between black and white people, if those passions and emotions on any side were real, evolution's fruits and gifts would have been revealed. We're in a trap across the globe of nations, with a pathology of infrastructure and of means to it, that a breaching method forced no one be able to fathom anything other. To play part with, in other words, to counter all the threats, to counter all the tortures, to counter all the identity thefts, frauds, impositions upon every single individual from a semi-ancient trap that knew every individual would have to counter that. Not as victims, not doing it wrong and then defending that to themselves and to others wrongly, but and simultaneously requiring uses of tactically criminally foreign influenced premises treatments and identity treatments, syntactically, sequence treatments, finite, active, and progressive simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. So God is an algebraic variable. That is the presence of what is temporary positive, as criminal insidious nature, or as temporary positive that is also temporary / lasting positive, as each person's nature longs to be. But now through and as identity ground locations and acceptations of self and of others and defenses of that cannot defend themselves and afford the short words of anyone who would counter the exploitation / S of this. And so this maintained since before everyone was born and since while everyone was born. Victims interbranch, victims intercampuses, homeschool, database relationships further, simultaneously private databases. This is exploiting where we are a value progression. Again, complete as the complete possession of an archetypal criminal enterprise, of its logic, of its method / S. See isms. I'm a fan of capitalism, but also, more importantly than that, is the liberation of the short words and their allowed protraction, which is actually true, as that identity of truth. That is still its identity as all exceptions, them not denied, not valuing them being denied, having been denied. So we have formal experts on history who are recorded how having been backed in defenses of tactically criminally foreign influenced identity thefts, frauds, fronts against our founding parents' identities that were leveraged per the breaching methods, means to counter them by countering whoever would try to further what they put up with the Constitution. So they had to hide their roles. So George Washington came to Wethersfield, Connecticut, in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut. There's Old Wethersfield, that's not Old Wethersfield, and then there's the Wethersfield that's together, Wethersfield. This is where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War to meet with a French general to secure the help to win the Revolutionary War. He had to leave in this town and in the North, slavery entrenched. For example, the breaching method applied and employed, breaching method employed, identity ground locations, areas of state, sciences, databases, relationships further, private too, simultaneously, as a state, only capable of being negative value nature progressions, acts and natures from each position where they had to speak about positive and negative anyway. This knew they would be speaking as criminal insidiousness nature. Natures of positive and of negative as strangers. And even as family, people right next to each other. This is a method that attaches everyone to lies. Through everyone. So it is a method / S. And the plural part is our own. And it's all recorded. But we have to discern it through our own. So they pretend we're calling them bad people. And it's personal. Because they're sequence shifting. For example, leading up to the World Trade Center attack. In that context, I've been asking to record it with locations that involve courts and police forms have crime acts and methods against innocent people because they have to hide live aggressions for their uses of the locations of the ground. Of their use of how they are victims, to keep reactions of it where their sophistication is complete possessed, blaming on other things other than themselves and defending that. So more and more valuing how individually grouped and together. More and more that's just these are identity ground locations, all of them. People needing to hide. Roles with database oriented. Illusions with locations tied to that. Distinctly and non-distinctly. Allegations, courts that aren't supposed to be making allegations against people, they're having people act. And they had people act in the past. So there are people with the news media and people associated with the Berlin Turnpike and mosques. And little girls. And little boys. Where they had confessions. And where they exploit. What is simultaneous. People acting simultaneously. People using theater around strangers. Sequence, they trick people to locations every year. This is already done. This is a verdict tied to what is on campuses. This is on off the locations of the news media. This is them making opinions and convictions rather than allowing people, separating us from the fake words they attach me and my family members to. They've been attaching little kids and their families to fake locations. They've been pretending passions and emotions. For many people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in his defendant capacities. And his co-defendants. John LeConte, Dominic Labriato, and people that live on his street, on Dearborn Street, and are associated with Eric Jensen, and people in that area and business in that area. Were court involved with former director of the FBI, co-defendants, who are also in various natures of cases proven and tied to other relevant federal criminals and overt criminal enterprises involved with predicate acts with the Wethersfield police over the last 4 months, around distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously, switching and forging names roles, and increasing the amounts of people involved with them doing that. They sought me out for this. These are also sequence shift roles. They have judges and prosecutors recorded, confessed, and demonstrated also being and having been forced, who are now adults and their kids, to collusion with them, switching, forging names, fabricating police reports, identity thefts and frauds that are intercities simultaneously connected, predicate acts off Central Connecticut State University that judges and prosecutors and their police forms were involved with, including military police. Now these are people that have been making allegations against people that catch them, per how investigators, and identities of the law and their kids are involved with this, with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and undercover pretending to be that, but actually in collusion with that, per their roles, fabricating audio and video interbranch, replacing actual audio and video actually recorded with fabricated audio and video. Fake, just put things in quotations. No one's watching. They are exploiting anomaly with identity ground locations. On off Hartford Hospital are people through time involved with predicate acts on off parks in my street and on off a field across the street from my house, with people with Washington D.C. and with how they have a method that keeps the journalists compromised and pretending passions and emotions. Multi-front with the interbranch, preventing writing, pretending other, forging names, switching names, fabricating police reports with various natures of the same departments, other departments. Then when you go to their locations, if you go there alone, they're going to fabricate audio and video one way. If you go there with people, they're going to do it another way. /S. With multi-front, with the news media. These are also people, again, every year leading up to the World Trade Center, and since a whole bunch of syntax ways with a whole bunch of other nations, all their programs, Puerto Rico, Mexico, criminal justice or psychology, Pakistan, Russia, China, all these people associated with the same judges, associated with a Mike Pandolf and prosecutors and attorneys. So associated with Mike Pandolf and people on next to schools involved with wire crimes and identity theft, fraud, sequence shifts, falsified police reports roles, fake sides of correlation nature roles. So these are methods of identity thefts that are bound though by one method, which is the subject. So we have to follow the mandated law. There is a Rob Rodriguez and our others who are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with predicate acts on off, knowingly or unknowingly, or wrongdoing, or just wrongdoing, or whatever it's called. Confessions and roles of people with like a DeMoro family, and people on a park, and all along Route 3 that are involved with this thing that has the grammar schools, has a Ray Reynolds associated with people at Central Connecticut State University, associated with investigators and judges and prosecutors tied to Ray Reynolds, and medical doctors that are involved with drugs, crimes, medicines crimes, identity thefts, frauds, and predicate acts with databases of kids. And they're acting illusions with locations on off campuses, because these are also people acting illusions in cases. They're presenting each age a fact-cheating age, or like some fake back and side, like people are legitimately going back and forth with questioning each other. They're preventing the sequence shifts from being used as evidence. They're presenting their whole crime methods, identity thefts and frauds acts, pretending not to understand people. They do this on a mass scale. They have all strangers online. Should be right about the specific acts and confessions regarding over the phone, and how they replace the audio and video, fabricated audio and video, on off the Wethersfield Police Department with 2 Mendez police, also with my town's police chief. There is an officer, Jerry Miller, who is recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with 2 Jerry Millers, Jerry Kerrs, and that's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated by John DeMoro, and by 2 Joe DeMoros, and a whole bunch of people tied to them involved with Central Connecticut State University, with people with the intelligence community, involved with principals of schools that had communications with them. Now they're telling them to shut their mouths, and they have the town lawyers, they have private lawyers, and they have state's attorneys in the state's attorney's office recorded being and having been used remotely. The buildings next to Fox Connecticut News in downtown Hartford, right on top of the north end of Hartford, in its shadow when the sun is midday. Here long, here many pray. North end, Bellevue Square. A lot of people died in Bellevue Square. A lot of people, per that fact-cheating nature method that is fake science of pretending other, and pretending it's for other causes, like politics, regardless if everyone's doing it at the same time. I just remind. Control your mind. So This is why I've asked many times for a response for the interbranch forging names and switching names, because that itself is evidence. Now, in depositions leading up to a 2006 case with former director of the FBI and his co-defendants, 3 of them involved when I was a kid and when I was older, with identity theft, frauds, roles, different natures of it, with complete strangers and with the ones involved, tied directly to and their family members. I never had a conversation, one word, with John LeConche's daughter, Dawn LeConche. She recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. One of the people involved with whatever it was, they had a mayor's daughter, that a Mayor Gold, who was not in my class. She was in my grade in some other classroom with another teacher. And she was involved with them where they would time things where you're never going to see the person. You don't know and they're making no sense. And where they're putting predicate acts into databases, sequence shifts. They're attaching you they're pretending they had conversations with you before that. Now, before that, all that happened too. An O'Brien family was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, involved with investigators that are criminally foreign influence, involved with child crimes with children and with databases, and with people faking passions and emotions and faking integrity. And now these are people involved with religious locations. Then they have then rather than deal with actual reality, they're pretending people are making allegations. So they're lying about people with locations and with physical delusions, and from the locations that are not supposed to be doing that. So more and more they've been hiding that. They've been fabricating audio and video, interbranch, individually grouped and together. These are also people tied to a Joshua Julian, and people associated with military and foreign and domestic and Navy, foreign and domestic, military forms, associated with forensics locations, involved with the same house. You know how people know a lot of people, one person. Then they get, when they become a topic, all those people get involved because they had conversations that are used to lock people in. Where they had that girl, pretend passions and emotions. So what is it like when the person's older? And they have, and now they catch them doing something still with the kids bad. Further, with the principal child offenders campus, then and now there were more confessions and people involved with that, and confessions tied to what he was doing. That is also tied to a house on 2 Route Highway, with that is a Victorian house. Recorded, confessed, and demonstrated also with the people with judges, and people involved with wire crimes and wire crime method /S through time relevant and uses of people's names, including people around people. Like, so there's an Ian up the street, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with, by others. I never had a conversation with him in life. And these are also people with Middletown locations. They have Middletown like a river place. And then, they have all the campuses of each age and nature involved with this. They have criminal justice programs involved with syntax that is Washington, D.C. and is World Trade Center. As what needs to hide lie progression, because that was remotely used sophistication. They have remote uses of job sites and of elections crimes, or elections laws, and things where people could say things, but they can make up with their exceptions. But they exploited, and having exploited exceptions, they value statutes set up for that. Because then those are identity grounds. Locations that can't defend themselves. And anyone, including themselves, from what exploits that. But they just have to defend themselves for what they've been part of, which is pseudoscience. So I want to have help because Fox Connecticut News won't let me have a voice. They want to steal my identity. They're involved with fabricating audio and video outside of courts. so they can have criminally foreign influence readings of precedents and statutes where they give the benefit of the doubt to themselves in courts. So they've been forging names and switching names outside of courts. They've been pretending passions and emotions and roles with people we interact with or come across from their positions, which is there are means to show how this is recorded. They also have physical delusions, and they're pretending other people do, and they're fabricating conversations with us since we were kids. These are doctors, foreign and domestic, involved with cliques. Dozens of people in the Britain Superior Court involved with predicate acts on, off, where Hangdog Lane, where 2 highway runs into Hangdog Lane in the Berlin Turnpike before the heart of Hartford, that are involved with my name. Through time. Criminal, I don't know them. They sought me out to pretend other. Now that's relevant because those are the people involved with predicate acts on my street recently and leading up to that. Also as people involved with predicate acts on Trinity College and on CCSU. Also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with the Joshua Stryker I never had a conversation with. And how there are foreign and domestic families associated with there have been people next to where the police station is now, where it used to be. There's a Daryl Chandler. I don't know Daryl Chandler. I don't know his sister's name even. There are places in Rocky Hill on the South State Highway, like a Dakota's restaurant. There's a Mexican restaurant there. Associated with Rob Rodriguez, for example. Associated with people with predicate acts on city CSU rolls. Also with ones in the past all the way down. Now these are various natures of police forms, interstates, that are involved criminally with former director of the FBI in his defendant capacities, with proven federal criminals, in a case that was ongoing at the time of my father's death. A case /S, whatever. That is also, before that came out, he had to prove that they had post-dated his legal papers from inside the Ninth Circuit Court, which is right next to the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan, right before the attack. And before that happened and leading up to it myself, I caught, which is actually recorded. They recorded themselves. They confirmed themselves. They simultaneously pretend others themselves. Hartford courts, in the Britain courts, in military police, in military courts, in military investigators, in families, in private ones that are involved with West Hartford locations that are right next to New Britain, and with New Britain that are also on off-campus locations, on off religious spots locations. Because this has a method by defenses of identities, for example, in relationship to the right to freedom to a religion. I'm a pantheist who believes that Muhammad is the last prophet, and that using science we could discern that it is most practical to discern that, and how it is most practical to observe how the sciences were most criminally foreign influence before modern messengers of religions. Already the sciences all identify the ground locations. They were now no longer that sophistication. That is magic. That is Mother's Alpha, God, inherent conceiving. Mother Nature, for example. The perfect world's volume will only increase. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of it. Hell is an exception Leth of Hadith is exception nature. And that's where both of them are value as nature / nature as value. For example, that is one of the positions of the ancient gaming system and of this YouTube request for Native Americans and for Americans distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously to force revealed this native science that uses what we are actually capable of, not per those narratives that are incomplete, not per those narratives that don't use the identity of science, that inventions work or not in relationship to it, they are further positive or not in relationship to it. And that science reveals that modern nations were criminally legalized as standing criminal and seditious natures of positive and of negative treatments, of identity treatments, of sequence treatments, and of science treatments, individually grouped and together. So we must counter an archetypal criminal enterprise as a predicate acts delivery system method /S as a method that propagated what it knew would only be capable of self-cultivating self-value uses of tactically, criminally, foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive, positive treatments, negative treatments, simultaneously, identity treatments, where those three identities of volume, individual, grouped, and species identity of volume, with other species, no. Them without the criminal foreign influences. We're in the pathology of homes, of means to them, since before cars. That part of that method /S, that was way worse than just slavery. And it was that, so things like slavery would be of value to it when we talk about it. Because we have to talk about it wrong. Because we're speaking about it not as in relationship to the predicate acts deliveries. We're blaming the wrong things, even when correctly. We're leaving out how they were our slaves too. Where and how there was well, look, they're rich though. Extorted that way. All locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influenced per a method that knew they would have to counter that by blaming on other nations that have nothing because they're different nations. They hate each other. They fight each other. But this is fluent through them. This exploited here and there the suits and ties with the roles with what they shared. Self-value that you can't self-value and afford discern. Correlation by the short words of our founding parents. George Washington did not chop down the fake branches of government in Connecticut that were our roles with the Institute of Living, founded in 1822 on the campus of Harvard Hospital, involved with medical racketeering, for example, with mental health, and with the courts and police forms, also ones that have badges, ones that are doctors, involved with medicines racketeering, way worse than war crimes, and with drugs crimes, as people involved with investigations, training of them, and involving also acting places. So I assume maybe that's for their to be identities that are fake. No, because they're child abused. There is no sophistication. They pretend that with passion motion, they want to debate things, leaving out what is recorded actually outside of courts, what is recorded actually outside of media locations, because it shows what is actually recorded in the media locations. So we have on a mass scale the stewards of the policing of the internet, and involved with uses of victims' reactions, like victims, and they blame it, oh, it's a bullying. The word / value bullying is being used by a sequence shifting method that is involved with juxtaposed uses of the worst in criminal incompetence of that, pretending to be other, as the people who work for presidents' fake sides, fake alternatives. The ancients understood how to reveal evolution's fruits and gifts, means out of nowhere, by understanding how we are fact-sheeping nature, understanding how we are sequence nature, as an identity of value / value progression, locked to all locations, areas, states. So I don't know the Mogman family, but there's a Mogman family that is recorded, confessed, and demonstrated. One of the people involved with judges, prosecutors, people with Washington, D.C., fire departments, people that locked girls where guys make confessions about them, but they simultaneously lie to them. And they act fake passions and emotions specifically because they have courts and prosecutors. And then they want to talk about what happens, good or bad. And they want to lie about both. Because they were involved with sequentious predicate acts with those people since before that. And intercampuses. I never knew a Kerr family in grammar school. And I barely knew them. And they pretended other. These are people associated with the DeMorrow family and other people. And the girl they shared, Heather Hansen, involved with predicate acts. As a victim, her brothers, her father, people on that street, Church Street, and on the house in the corner, recorded, confessed, and demonstrated involved with news media involved with predicate acts with them. On off. So the corner of Church Street and Main Street in Old Wethersfield. That's there's a house there. And then there's the Webb House, where George Washington had to come and had to leave slavery in Wethersfield. These are people on that street involved with a house on my street, involved with predicate acts with judges, prosecutors, and Wethersfield police over the last 4 months. They sought me out. They're pretending passions and emotions, and but because they're hiding also how they've been involved with predicate acts with Facebook through time. Same courts that were criminally involved with locations leading up to the World Trade Center attack, and they were involved criminally with their own locations, their investigators, vetting identities, whole bunch of other nations keeping this the outcome /S. And their physical delusions are also evidences. But we have to counter the name switching, individually grouped and together by the branches, multi-front with the news media. Everyone speaking through others, them pretending passions and emotions. Tied to that first, there are all ties to the whole like an Aiello family. On the other side of the park, too. From the one involved with the Mogman girls, I don't know. So these are people also who recorded, confessed, demonstrating all along Route 3, involved by men and women. They have a Danielle Perron and her brother Tom Perron. I recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, sought me out to demonstrate, confess, record. They're involved with investigations, where they acted they acted passions and emotions, and sequence shifts tied illusions, and identity thefts and frauds roles. In the past, also with that park, and also as the men that were kids then that were per them the simultaneously or right in the same time the boyfriends of Danielle Perron, like a Mark Perron, Kevin Perron, I don't know them, There's some other corona also recorded confessed like he's associated with bowling or bowling alley involved with identity theft. I was